All right. Where are we? Hello. Hello. Yes, I saw that. No spoilers though for those who haven't seen it. I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was fun. It was fun. A good time was had by all. So today we're starting our space unit um with astrology and horoscopes. So the plan for today is I will lecture on just kind of what exactly astrology is, because I think um, a lot of people are into it, are introduced to astrology uh, as it is, as it's presented in, print media like magazines, and now on social media. And they're not really acquainted with its history. At least when I say its history, I'm talking more about, I guess, what we could call Western astrology or astrology in the European tradition, which goes all the way back to, well, it goes all the way back to like ancient Babylonian astronomy, really. But um, one thing that I think is lost on a lot of people um, is the fact that astrology and astronomy were once the same thing. And as astronomy grew into a proper science of its own, astrology kind of turned into its own thing, um, turned into a method of divination. So I'll talk a little bit about how all of that happened and how all that works. Then we will discuss Carl Sagan's approach to explaining the difference between astrology and astronomy in the episode of Cosmos that I uploaded, because technically I posted a link. Um, I ended up posting a link because it seemed like some people were having trouble watching the uploaded videos. So there are links to those. And there's also a couple of readings I want to look over and discuss as a group. So it's going to be almost kind of like seminar style, especially after we finish the lecture and after we've had a little bit of a break. Speaking of space, though, if the weather is good over the next couple of nights, I encourage you all to look up because um, according to my little Northern Lights app, yes, I have one. It's called Aurora. It tracks solar activity, solar wind activity. And here I've got, let's see, for the next little while, the KP index is going up, and Monday is high, Wednesday is high, but Tuesday we have a KP of 7, which means that you can see here. I don't know. I'll show you. That means that the KP index is a measure of how much closer to the equator the northern lights can potentially be visible. So, um, over the next coming days, if the weather is good, if the viewing conditions are optimal, and if this forecast is accurate, you may have a chance to see the northern lights in case you missed them when they were during the previous solar storm. So that's something I thought I'd make you all aware of. And by the way, you can just download this app, right? It's just called Aurora. It's free. It comes with ads, but you can set it up so that you get notifications. So whenever there's the potential for northern lights in your area, you get a little notification. Um, I saw them when we had the previous solar storm earlier this year, and they were very spectacular. They were more spectacular. I've seen them several times because I'm from Northern Ontario, and it's not like super far north, but there's a lot less light pollution. So, it's not like you're in the Arctic Circle or anything, But you can see them from time to time up there out in the country on a good night. But the most recent solar storm, I was able to see them here in the city with all of the city lights, all that light pollution, and they were brighter than I've ever seen them up in the North Bay Sudbury area, right? Oh, Izzy saw them in Iqaluit. Yeah, yeah. So that you must have been treated to quite a good show up there, because that's right where they usually happen, right? Around the Arctic Circle. Um, so that must have been spectacular, and you wouldn't have had to deal with nearly as much light pollution. So wow, that's wonderful. Um, so yeah, if you have the chance, you should look up. Yeah, Olivia's seen them too. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, I saw them. I've seen them 3 times. Uh, there was once in Southern Ontario when we had a big solar storm. Once again, when I was in Northern Ontario, I was just driving home, and that was when I heard them crackling. You can sometimes hear them crackling too, which is really cool. And then, of course, the solar storm. So, talking about space stuff, keep an eye out. If you've got a clear night, and if you're not dealing with light pollution, you can see them. And it's best if you have a phone, like if you have this phone, a smartphone, and a little tripod for it, and you can keep it still, and you can take a picture, 5 to 10 second exposure. Or if you have a real camera, use a real camera. But if you can keep it still and take a 5 second exposure, you'll get much more color and everything than what you can see with the naked eye. So that's really cool. So everybody keep an eye out for that. That's going to be fun. But as far as astrology and horoscopes go, yeah, like I said, the plan is I'm going to explain that stuff. Then we're going to talk about Sagan's treatment of astrology as a pseudoscience. And then we'll discuss the very short reading by Day and the longer one by Anderson and colleagues. What even is astrology? Well, astrology and astronomy used to be the same thing. Astronomy is the study of celestial phenomena, right? It comes from the word astra, which means star, and nomos, which means like order or law, or really law-like order. So astronomers study all kinds of things. They study not just stars, but the planets and the moons in this solar system. That's planetary astronomy. Now, of course, they can also, thanks to developments in telescopes and like, the Hubble, the James Webb, Kepler, we can see that there are planets orbiting other stars, and we can study those. Um, it's very interesting. I remember, I'm old enough that when I was young, um, we did not know for certain that there were any other planets outside of our solar system. Um, so I'm old enough to remember that. I'm old enough to remember the first, the news of the first confirmed exoplanet. That is a planet that's outside of our solar system. Um, and now we know of thousands of them, which is fantastic. That's just amazing. Of course, they also study other celestial phenomena in solar systems and outside of solar systems. So comets, asteroids, things like that. But also galaxies, which are vast islands of millions and millions and millions of stars. Nebulae, which are big clouds of gas and dust uh, in which stars form. And then really crazy stuff like black holes, obviously, black holes, which we can't directly observe, but which we can infer. We can infer their existence due to their effects on things that we can observe. So, the way things orbit them, or we can see, X-rays emitted by black holes as material falls into them. Quasars, which are quasi-stellar radio objects, probably very, very old, distant, active galaxies where there's lots of matter falling into the black holes at the centers of those galaxies. And probably there aren't any quasars anymore. They're just so far away that it takes the light so long to reach us that we're still seeing them now. Pulsars, these are neutron stars tilted on an axis which spin very quickly, and they appear to flash several times a second, right? All kinds of cool stuff up there in the universe that we know about now thanks to astronomy. And of course, it began to emerge as a proper science during the scientific revolution. At least astronomy as we know it today did. It's not like no one had been doing astronomy, though. It's just that astronomy and astrology were kind of the same thing. Before European astronomers started doing what they were doing, we're talking people like Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Brahe, Christian Huygens, Isaac Newton, all these figures. Before we get these guys in Europe studying astronomy, there was a flourishing astronomical tradition going on in the Arab world. While Europe was in the Dark Ages, the home of Islam, Dar al-Islam in the Middle East, was in the midst of what we call the Islamic Golden Age, and it was a big, a big time for the sciences, for the arts, for all kinds of stuff. So there was lots of astronomy / astrology going on there. And of course, those astronomers had borrowed from earlier traditions like the Greeks, the Persians, the ancient Indians, the Babylonians. And even before all of this, most people around the world, and this is something discussed in the episode of Cosmos that you were supposed to watch, all human societies needed to pay close attention to what was going on in the sky, because it was how they reckoned time. In order to survive as a society, we had to be able to reckon time. That includes the seasons, the months. Days are easy, right? Sun comes up, it's daytime. Okay, great. But how many days are in a month? How many in a year? How do we know when in time we are? Before the existence of modern calendars, we use the sky. Uh, oh, the topic proposal is due on the 2nd, so Friday. Max says it's crazy how much of the universe has been discovered because of Hubble Space Telescope and the James Webb Space Telescope. And it opens up so much potential for science. I agree. Like, what a time to be alive. It's amazing. Like, I've talked about that eclipse that I saw, and that many of you also saw. And I thought, wow, it's really something that we just know we can predict when these are going to happen because we have such a good knowledge of the motions of the planets relative to the sun. In fact, in the weeks leading up to that eclipse, I was watching Bill Nye on the news, Bill Nye the Science Guy, right? I was watching him give an interview on the news, and he was describing how they actually all figured out a more accurate calculation of the path of the eclipse as the day came closer, and it was like a matter of meters, like it was like that small that they were able to calculate. Here's where the umbra is going to be, and here's where the penumbra is going to be, and it's, wow, wacky stuff. It's amazing. Yeah, there's a rubric for the essay. There's a template, and then there's a link to a blog post with rubrics for the essay. But read through those and think about those as you're working on the proposal. And also pay attention to the last couple of slides on the for the slides on the essay writing lecture, where I kind of give a rough outline of what an A range proposal or paper looks like versus a B range versus a C range, etc. So yeah, that's there. You'll find that in the helpful materials module, by the way, on Brightspace. So that's one reason why that's one reason why we needed to pay attention to what's going on in the sky. Um, Another is for navigation, um, because the stars stay pretty much the same. Um, they move a bit depending on the time of year. Certain constellations will, move because we're dealing, we're going around the sun. So you might see some different constellations in the winter versus the summer. Um, but the sky, the stars are more or less fixed. Um, which means that as you're moving from where you are, um, the relative positions of the stars will appear different. Um, Even though all the stars kind of stay where they are in the sky, where they look like they are relative to us on Earth changes as we go north or south or east or west, right? So, yeah, let's talk a little bit more about both of these because about navigation and about reckoning time um, because I think that the fact that humans have been doing this for so long is also part of the reason why um, people put maybe why there's a sort of like a lingering faith in astrology in many cultures because we can rely on the motions of the stars and the planets and their positions relative to us on Earth to know things like where we are and what time it is, right? Let's talk about navigation first. Um, so who knows how to find the North Star, Polaris? Have you ever spotted it? If you live in the northern hemisphere, you can easily see the North Star no matter the time of year if you've got a clear night. It's not exactly the biggest one. It's not the brightest one. In fact, it's actually a little bit dim. Yeah, so you know the constellation, the Big Dipper, like Mac is saying? Um, on the Dipper part, the sort of edge of the ladle points up towards the handle of the Little Dipper, and that is Polaris. And Polaris doesn't move. At least it doesn't really move. It doesn't appear to move very much from our perspective because it's at the North Celestial Pole. That's why it's called Polaris. So as the Earth is turning through the night, the stars all appear to rotate around Polaris. Now, if you can find Polaris and you have a little one of those sextants, the things that can measure, the angle from the horizon to whatever it is you're looking at, um, then you can know where you are on the planet Earth latitudinally, how far away from the equator you are, at least in the northern hemisphere. So, if you're in Ottawa, like I am, I think we're somewhere around 45 or 46 degrees north latitude. You can figure out where you are, how far north or south you are, by finding Polaris and looking at how many degrees um, above the horizon it is. And in Ottawa, it'll be about 45 or 46 degrees above the horizon. If I go further north, it'll be different, right? The further north I go, the more overhead Polaris will be until I finally get to where I'm right below the North Celestial Pole and Polaris would be right overhead. If you go closer to the equator, Polaris is going to be closer to the horizon. So it tells you where north is by telling you where the North Celestial Pole is, which is not exactly the same as magnetic north. Yeah, halfway between the equator and North Pole. So yeah, like Jill is saying, it's about 45 degrees north latitude. So that's great. Yeah, now you can tell how far north or south you are in terms of latitude if you can find Polaris. And you can do this. You don't need a complicated astronomical tool. You can do this with a protractor if you want to. Um, so that's one way we can use the stars for navigation. And lots of cultures have used the stars this way. Of course, it's particularly important if you're sailing. So, like the ancient Polynesians navigated the seas and explored um, the islands in the Pacific Oceans using astronomical knowledge like this. It would have been different stars they were using because they're in the southern hemisphere, but they did this because of their astronomical knowledge. Same during the age of exploration, discovery, and colonization. European sailors would use the stars to navigate, north and south, and then they would use chronometers, which I'll talk a little bit more later, to tell how far west or east they were, right? So that's navigation. How about reckoning time? Well, um, think about the word month. The word month. Does it sound like any other word? Any M word? Um, an M for a celestial object? Yeah, moon, exactly, moon. Of course, the calendar we use now, the Gregorian calendar, does not exactly follow the lunar month. But how many months are there in a year? 12. How many times does the moon go from full moon back to full moon, or rather, I should say new moon back to new moon? 12 or 13 times. So that's what months are, basically. They come from this idea that the word month is cognate with the word moon. Cognate means of the same blood. It means these words are related to one another. So when you say many moons ago, something like that, like a little colloquialism like, oh, many moons ago, you're saying many months ago, right? Um, and each full moon, has a designation. You've probably heard of things like harvest moons and hunters moons. I forget the full moon we just had. I forget what it was called. Um, but there's a name for the full moon for every month. When you have two full moons in one month, that's called a blue moon. So that's one way we can reckon time. Just look at what phase is the moon. Like, I'll see you in 1 month. Okay, so the moon is, I don't know, a waning gibbous. Okay, I'll see you the next time it's a waning gibbous moon, right? That's 1 month approximately. Um, the buck moon. Okay, thanks, Savina. Yeah, the buck moon. I wonder why it's called that. Is it buck like a coin, like a dollar coin, or is it a buck like a male deer? I wonder what the story is there. The days of the week. This is interesting. How about the days of the week? The days of the week are interesting because we have 7 of them, and this kind of shows you ancient what ancient astronomers or astrologers, you know, kind of tells you a little bit about the cosmos that they thought we inhabited. It survives in our names for the days of the week in Romance languages and Germanic languages. So, how many days of the week are there? 7. Why 7? Because before modern astronomy, there was believed to be 7 planets. Earth wasn't a planet. Earth was just the center of the cosmos, right? This was just the middle of everything. And the sun and the moon were considered planets because the word planet comes from the ancient Greek wanderer. So the sun and the moon move against the firmament, the stars that don't change. So the sun and the moon were considered planets. And then the other 5 planets were the ones that we could see with the naked eye. So you've got Mercury and Venus, which are now we know are closer to the sun than Earth. So Mercury's the closest, Venus is the second closest. Then there's us, but of course we didn't know that. We were still on the Ptolemaic model of the solar system, so it was believed Earth was at the center of everything. Then Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. We didn't know about Uranus and Neptune because you needed a telescope to be able to see those planets, and we didn't have telescopes during this time. So it was believed that there were 7 planets: the sun and the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So we have one day of the week for each of the planets on the Ptolemaic model. Ptolemaic, I'm going to spell that because it's from Ptolemy, an ancient astronomer. He was he was one of the Ptolemies, one of the Greek rulers of Egypt, a descendant of Alexander the Great, ancestor of Cleopatra. One of those. One of those Ptolemies was an astronomer, and well, we'll talk a bit more about Ptolemy in a moment. But so that's one way you can reckon time. Hey, how about the names of the days of the week other than Sunday and Monday? This will give us something really cool. We can talk about the Interpretatio Germanica. Um, what's up with the days of the week? Let's start with English, right? Days of the week, Monday and Sunday. Okay, easy. Moon Day and Sunday. Easy. Okay. But what's up with the other names of the week? Saturday is Saturn, and that's really the only other Latin one. The rest are all Germanic. So Saturday is obviously Saturn's day. Yeah, Izzy, whoever, yeah, Wednesday. Weird, right? Because Wednesday, which is spelled like Wednesday, that comes from Woden's day. Woden is the Old English name for the Germanic god that, if nowadays in German you would call Wotan. If you're a fan of, I don't know, maybe you're into Vikings or something, then you know him as Odin, right? Wednesday is Odin's day. How about Tuesday? Yeah, Izzy. Yeah, Thursday is Thor's day. Thor, son of Odin and protector of humanity. Thursday is Thor's day. What about Tuesday? Uh, that's a good guess. That's a good guess, Savina. Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. Oh, your cat's name is Thor? That's amazing. Well, Tuesday in English um comes from the god Tu or Tyr, who might have been a war god, but who also might have been the chief of the Germanic pantheon. So before Odin was the All Father, it might have actually been Tyr or Tu. We don't know. We know this because Tu, uh, in like Proto Norse, might also be cognate with it might also be cognate with an old Proto Indo European word, Deus Pater, which means Sky Father, and that is the origin of Zeus and Jupiter's names. And yeah, Izzy, Friday is it's a good guess. I believe it is actually Frigga, not Freya. Although they might also be the same. But yeah, Freya or Frigga. And by the way, the adding of the A on the end is complete contrivance. That was because um, when philologists were studying Germanic myths and Norse myths, they wanted to sort of make them sound more like classical myths, so they would add an A on the end, right? So a word like what's a good one? The goddess Hela, right? Kate Blanchett in the Marvel movies, it's Hela. Um, that is a contrivance. It's actually just Hell, right? It was later scholars who added the A's to the end of a lot of these names just because they wanted it to sound more like the Greek and the Roman gods, right? So that's the days of the week in English, one for each um, planet, and a lot of them have names that are rooted in like a Germanic language of some sort, like Proto-Germanic or Proto-Norse or something like that. These are all cousin languages, right? All the Germanic languages like English, German, Dutch, Swedish. Icelandic. They're all distant cousins. But then you have the Romance languages, right? So like who was it? It was so Savina said Aries for Tuesday. Um Aries was the Greek god of war, and his Roman counterpart was Mars, right? And what do we call Tuesday in French? hmm Mars Day. Mars Day. Exactly. Wednesday. What do we call Wednesday in French? So here, like Tyr and Mars were seen as counterparts. Yeah, exactly. Mercredi from Mercury. This is the Interpretatio Germanica. The Romans, when they went up into Germania, they were like, what are these Germanic people doing? They're worshiping this guy called Wotan. Oh, that's Mercury. Why is it Mercury? Well, Wotan or Woden or Odin was a psychopomp. He would take the souls of the dead to the underworld. He would take them away to wherever they would need to go. That was Mercury's job. Also, his Greek counterpart Hermes. That was his job too. He was a psychopomp. He would take the souls of the dead down to Tartarus, right? And so the Romans, when they got up into what they called Germania, they were like, oh, okay. So these guys worship this psychopomp. And they call him Wotan or Woden. Oh, that's Mercury. Okay, so these Germanic folks, they worship Mercury, right? So that's why Wednesday, it's Wednesday in English and mercredi in French, right? Yeah, and yeah, as you see, vendredi from Venus, jeudi, Jupiter. So jeudi is Thursday, but in English, Thursday is Thursday. Thor with his hammer, right? His hammer, Mjolnir, that word probably means something like lightning. And what do Jupiter and Zeus have? They have the thunderbolt, right? So they were like, oh, these Germanics, they've got this guy Thor. Well, that's clearly Jupiter because of the lightning and so forth, right? And yeah, Venus, a goddess of like fertility and plenty, and same with Frigg or Freya, fertility goddess. So that's the Interpretatio Germanica. When the Romans got up into Germania, they were like, oh, okay, so all these gods that they're worshiping, those are just their names for the same gods we worship. And that's why in Romance languages, which descend ultimately from Latin, the names are the way they are. And in Germanic languages, the names are the way they are. And English is kind of a mix because English has been so influenced by French, even though it's a Germanic language. That's why we have Saturday, Saturn's day, but we also have Thor's day, right? Isn't that cool? Like that's so cool. I think that's awesome. So that's all sort of a vestige of the time when astrology was in its heyday, because we thought that the Earth was just the center of the cosmos. The sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn were the planets, and that was it. And if anything unexpected happened, it was a portent of doom. If you got a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse or a comet was sighted in the sky, or perhaps a meteor through the atmosphere, that's not supposed to happen. The stars are supposed to literally work, like clockwork. So if a comet comes along or an eclipse happens, it's like a bad sign, right? Astrology, by the way, comes from astra, star, and logos, which can mean logic, reason, or true speech, or for our purposes, the study of. And these were the exact same thing until the scientific revolution. That is when these disciplines really started to diverge. And the roots of astrology go all the way back to those calendrical systems I mentioned earlier. Sagan talks about it in the documentary when he shows us the ruins of that, the Anastasi ruins in I believe it's in New Mexico, and then that spiral where the sun shines on it on the summer solstice, right? Those ancient peoples in the Americas, they were setting up big giant monuments, Stonehenge in England, or um, any number of other sites like this, because they worked like calendars, right? And every society on the planet did this, right? And that's important. That's very important to note, right? Everyone had to do this. It was a matter of survival to pay close attention to what was happening in the sky, because you needed to know when the time was, when is it time to strike the camp and go somewhere else? When is it time to plant your crops? When is it time for the hunting to begin, right? Um, you know, very important stuff. And also, if we need to go a hunting or a fishing or migrate somewhere, maybe we're a pastoral folk and we have to take our herd, maybe we've got a bunch of sheep or something and we've got to take them around to feed them constantly. Well, we need to know where we are, right? So we need to know what's up, literally what's up. But um, as a more materialist way of looking at the cosmos emerged during the scientific revolution, we began to see the stars and planets as objects out there beyond the planet Earth. We began to we realized the Earth was not the center of the cosmos, but just another planet orbiting the sun, thanks to Copernicus, who may have gotten the idea from a guy named Aristarchus, an ancient Greek thinker. Um, and astrology continued on, but it kind of became a form of divination, rather like how our ancient calendrical systems could tell us what was going to happen in the future. Like we could know, like, okay, we're this many moons away from winter, right? So we know in the future it's going to get cold and we need to start storing food, right? Okay, we know that because of the stars. But it moved over into divination and kind of went the way of, like alchemy and, stuff, disciplines like that. Where alchemy gave way to chemistry, um, astrology gave way to astronomy. But, eventually alchemy just kind of fell out of practice, whereas astrology kind of turned into something else. It turned into a form of divination. Um, what it claims to do is divine information about you, your life, and your character from the positions of the celestial objects at the moment of your birth. That's what it does, or what it claims to do. Now, what I'm talking about today is what I'm calling Western astrology, which ultimately came out of Mesopotamia, ancient Babylon and later Persia. This knowledge spread. It kind of went in two directions. It went to Greece and then to Rome. And then after the end of the classical period, the Islamic astronomers were doing all kinds of stuff, and then finally back to Europe, um, with a sort of reintroduction of a lot of classical knowledge and the further developments that these Islamic scholars had made. That all started to make it back to Europe and eventually would spark off the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. But there's other kinds of astrology, right? I mean, there's India has a absolutely booming, um, I don't want to call it a market, but astrology is very big in India, right? Before you do something important, like before you buy a house or get married or, do something important, you go to an astrologer. A lot of people still do this in India. And of course, we're probably all familiar with the Chinese horoscope, where it changes your sign, is not determined by the month you were born, but the year you were born, right? Sometimes, and I know this is kind of a cheesy example, but sometimes you go to a nice neighborhood Chinese restaurant and they have those really nice calendars that they'll give out. And you can take home a calendar, and it has the year, is it the year of the dragon or the monkey or the rat or the tiger or whatever year it is. So, on Western astrology, my astrological sign is Virgo. But for Chinese astrology, if I'm not mistaken, I'm a tiger. So different systems, right? Different systems that kind of developed independently of one another. It makes sense. That I'm a that I'm a Virgo. Yeah. Yeah, I say that like I'm a Virgo and people are like, I can see that. And I'm like, what? I don't know what that means. And as we'll see, actually, all of the Western astrological signs are actually off. But I'll explain that in a moment. So, Western astrology, as I mentioned, is a kind of divination. It's not a science. Divination, we're talking about things like reading tea leaves or tarot cards, or dowsing is also a kind of divination, right? Yeah, exactly, Mac. You're I'm such a Virgo, right? Um was I was watching man, I was watching RuPaul's Drag Race. This is another one of those things where the in the LGBTQ community, um uh there there seems to be an appetite for paranormal stuff, right? Compliment, yeah. And I was watching, oh man, who was it? Was All Star season 2, and oh man, I can't remember the name, but it was like I'm so and so, and I'm a fucking Libra, and I was like, that's awesome. But but yeah, no, this is interesting because of something called because of the axis tilt of the Earth and the way the Earth wobbles over a period of many thousands of years. The astrological signs that are used in Western astrology are actually off by one whole sign. So I'm not actually a Virgo. Surprise! I'm not actually a Virgo. I don't know what I am. Oh, yes, Adore Delano. That's the one. I was trying to remember her name. Yeah, I'm Adore and I'm a fucking Libra. I thought I don't believe in astrology, but that is funny. Um that was a good season too. Um, okay, so yeah, it's a method of divination. It's a means of gathering information from a supernatural or a divine source. That's what astrology is as it is currently practiced. And it makes sense, right? The names of the days of the week are the names of gods, and they share, at least in the in the Romance languages, the languages that come from Latin. The names of the week are shared with the planets, the planets that we knew about or that we thought were planets, like the sun and the moon, um, which we thought were gods. Right? The word planet comes from planetai, which is ancient Greek, and that means wanderers. Why are they wanderers? Well, if you go out and look at the sky, the stars don't really change from night to night. They rotate around the celestial pole, sure, but from night to night, they don't really change where they are. But planets, however, if you watch them over a period of months, every night, Mars is here. Say Mars, for example. Mars is here. Next night, it's there, there, there. And over many months, the planets will appear to move forward and then back and then forward again. They appear to wander through the sky. So we called them wanderers. I don't know, Savina. Because I know very little about astrological traditions outside of the one we're talking about today. Um, uh, but I know that the the system we use, which comes from ancient Mesopotamia, when they figured all that out, the Earth was tilted like this, and now it's tilted a little bit differently, and so the signs are actually off. I'll explain it. I'll explain further once I set this up with some discussion, right? So the Wanderers, they don't just move with the stars. They exhibit this retrograde motion, which again, Sagan talks about in that episode of Cosmos, right? And that was a challenge for early astronomy, was explaining retrograde motion. So a couple things that you need to know to understand, what's really going on. Like if you go to an astrologer or you read your horoscope in a newspaper, where does that come from, right? Where do people get that from? This is where, but you need to know these things. So this is a celestial sphere right here. This is what an astronomer or an astrologer would use, or even a navigator might use this, although this is now all digital. It's now all satellites and GPS and so forth. But think of the celestial sphere as a three-dimensional map of the entire sky as seen from the surface of the Earth. Earth is in the middle, and all the stars and planets and everything we could see, we could put on the celestial sphere. It's kind of like, have you ever been to a planetarium and you sit down and you sit back in those chairs in the planetarium, and the planetarium is just a big dome, right, with a screen, and they put stuff on it and it looks really neat. That's a celestial sphere. It's basically like a complete planetarium. Earth is in the middle, and it's the ultimate planetarium, right? And the screen on which all the stars are projected, that's the celestial sphere. Of course, the stars aren't really on a celestial sphere. They're off in space. But you can imagine that there is a clear sphere with all these stars on it, and the stars don't really move that much relative to one another. And so we can use it as kind of like a map of the night sky. Yeah, I haven't been to a planetarium in years, but they're pretty cool. I'd like to go to a planetarium again. But as I said, we do have the ultimate planetarium on the planet Earth, because this here, the sky, is it's full of stars, and that's the celestial sphere. When we map them on a sort of three-dimensional globe around the Earth, that gets us our celestial sphere. Now, the Earth turns on its axis, of course. Zorbing. I don't know this word. What is zorbing? Is that like when you lie down? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like imagine, yeah, okay, yeah. So the human, yeah, okay, that's cool. I didn't know that's what that was called. So if you had a Zorb that had all of the stars that you could see from anywhere on the Earth, that would be like a celestial sphere that you could go into. Yeah, exactly right. So the planet spins. Obviously, it goes around like this, and it turns on this axis, and that is, of course, the axis points to the north and south celestial pole. So up here, you would see the star Polaris. This is why Polaris doesn't move, but the other stars throughout the night would track this way. They wouldn't move relative to one another. Like the Big Dipper over there is still going to look like the Big Dipper over there. They appear to move for the same reason that the sun appears to rise and set. It's because of the rotation of the Earth. This is the equator of the Earth, and if we kind of project out from the equator of the Earth to the equator of the celestial sphere, we get the celestial equator. Pretty neat. Now, here's some more important stuff to know. The apparent path of the sun through the year, like around the Earth, traces a path that we call the ecliptic. It traces this path against the celestial sphere. We call that the ecliptic. And notice that it's not lined up with the celestial equator. The celestial equator, so you can see Earth's equator there in green and the celestial equator here, is kind of offset from the ecliptic by 23.4 degrees. So we can say that the Earth's axis tilt is 23.4 degrees from the north celestial pole. This plane is called the ecliptic. Now, when the sun crosses one of these points here along the ecliptic, we get an equinox. The vernal for spring and the autumnal for summer. But what happens if the sun is over here, where my mouse is pointing? Actually, let's draw a little circle. What happens if the sun is in one of these red circles? And let's say, well, this is north, right? So let's mark this clearly, north and south. So that means that this little area that I'm putting the star is the northern hemisphere. Just to kind of make this a little more concrete. All right, so what happens? You know, the sun's doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doo. What happens over here on this side if I'm in the northern hemisphere? Like if I'm on this side of the sun versus this side of the sun. Yeah, solstice. The longest days of the year versus the shortest. So if this is the northern hemisphere and I'm on this side of the sun, the northern hemisphere is getting a lot of sunlight. It must be summertime in the northern hemisphere, but it's winter in the southern hemisphere. But if the sun was over here and Earth was over here, it would be winter in the northern hemisphere and summer in the southern hemisphere. And yeah, these vernal equinoxes, or the vernal equinox, and the this is the shortest. This is the or no, this is not the shortest day of the year. This is the day in spring. It's like usually March 20th or 21st, where the day and the night are of equal length. That's why it's called an equinox. Same in winter or autumn. And if it's the summer solstice, we're going to get the longest day of the years, and it's the winter solstice, we're going to get the shortest day of the year. The summer solstice is in a lot of in the Germanic tradition is also called midsummer, right? And it's no coincidence that a lot of important holidays, like Christmas, for example, fall around the winter solstice. So very good. That's all the solstices. What happens? Here's one that I want to see who knows the answer to this. This right here is the ecliptic. So we've got our celestial equator and we've got the ecliptic. This is the plane that's roughly equivalent to the equator on the sun, and we're offset from it by 23.4 degrees. Let's say the moon gets in the middle of the Earth and the sun, and it crosses the ecliptic. What happens then? Yeah, solar eclipse. That's like, sometimes you might wonder to yourself, why don't we get a solar eclipse more often? Well, the moon gets between the Earth and the sun all the time. But it doesn't always do so right on the ecliptic. And that's what gives us a solar eclipse. A lunar eclipse, similarly, the moon will be over here, and the Earth is casting its shadow on the moon. But light is bent around the Earth thanks to Earth's atmosphere and the way that it lenses light. And so during a total lunar eclipse, the moon looks all red and eerie and stuff. That's because light from the sun is shining through Earth's atmosphere, lensing around and casting not a shadow, but a beam of eerie light on the moon. So lunar eclipses happen over here, solar eclipses happen over here. And that's the ecliptic. So what's up with all the constellations of the zodiac? Why are those important? Well, those are the constellations that appear along the ecliptic. So there are 12 of them. And keep in mind, constellations are not just, groups of stars. They're also areas of the sky in the celestial sphere. So they're analogous to like countries or continents on a map of Earth, like on Earth's surface. It's like, oh, here's North America, here's the Atlantic Ocean. These are like areas of the globe that we delineate. The constellations in astronomy and astrology are areas on the celestial sphere. They're not just interesting shapes that stars happen to make from when viewed from Earth. They're like areas on a map of the sky. So these are the constellations of the zodiac, the constellations that appear along the ecliptic. And here you can see the sun in the middle, the position of Earth at different times of the year. It looks like the summer solstice, winter solstice, um, uh, autumnal equinox, and vernal equinox. But by the way, this is based in the northern hemisphere. Like, you know that if you're in the southern hemisphere, like if I were in Australia right now, it would be winter, right? So this is kind of northern hemisphere biased. Yeah, if I were in Australia or in Antarctica or New Zealand or someplace like that, or Chile, it would be winter right now. But I'm not. I'm in Canada, which means it's summer. So those are the constellations of the zodiac. The constellations of the zodiac, just to recap, are those parts of the celestial sphere that the ecliptic runs through. Now, what do astrologers do with this? Well, they used to navigate and reckon time, but now what they do is they use this information to construct what we call horoscopes. And horoscopes, you've probably seen a horoscope, in the newspaper, or I don't know if you guys read newspapers, maybe magazines, or maybe there's an app or a website or something that gives you a horoscope, right? But proper horoscopes are star charts. They're very detailed star charts that tell you where the moon, the sun, and the planets are in the zodiac at the time and place of your birth. And what is supposed to be happening is that all of these bodies, where they are, their angles relative to one another, is supposed to tell you something about your character or your life or something like that. And that's where we get these zodiac signs from. Right? So again, I'm a Virgo. I don't know what that means, but it means I was born when the sun was in the constellation Virgo, right? So that's what we call a sun sign. There are also moon signs, so it's like, where's the moon when you were born? Maybe it's in a different constellation, right? The idea is that where all of this is happening is supposed to tell you something important about you. Now, here's where I have to be a party pooper, right? And this is always how I describe this class to people. People ask me, well, philosophy of the paranormal, what on earth do you teach in philosophy of the paranormal? And I jokingly explain to people, well, people join the class and they think that I'm going to tell them how astrology works, for example. And then what I actually do is tell them why astrology doesn't work. And I'm sorry to say that it probably does not work. Let's go back a few slides. So here you can see this axis tilt of 23.4 degrees from the north ecliptic pole and the north celestial pole. In other words, the celestial equator is kind of off kilter from the ecliptic by the same figure. Well, that doesn't always remain that way. The Earth wobbles like a top that's spinning. You know how tops kind of wobble like this, except the Earth does this over many, 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 many thousands of years. So, in like a few thousand years, Polaris won't be the North Star anymore. It'll be some other star because the Earth will have wobbled a little bit. As a result of this wobble, the zodiacs are all off. The zodiac is off by an entire sign. So I'm not a Virgo. I'm actually a Libra. But look here, it says if you're born from August 20 something to September 27th, you're a Virgo. Well, you would have been in ancient Mesopotamia, sure. But now you're actually a Libra because that's where the sun will be at that time of year. So that's the first thing to note, is that the zodiac is off by an entire sign, and no astrologer seems to do anything about that. You can watch a video I've linked of Bill Nye the Science Guy explaining this. Another thing to note is that twin studies, another thing mentioned by Sagan, show that astrological predictions are not accurate. So twins would have identical horoscopes, but there are some cases where twins are separated at birth. They go on to live very, very different lives. One twin might live a life of privilege while the other lives a life of suffering. But why would their fates be any different if they have the same horoscope? Doesn't make sense. Besides, here's another thing. If you were on some other planet, far off in the galaxy, you'd have a completely different zodiac, completely different set of constellations. Do those influence your character or your life? Right? If in the distant future there's an astronaut who goes thousands of light years away and decides to live on another planet halfway across the galaxy, well, she's not going to be a Libra or a Scorpio or whatever. They're going to be something else because it's completely different constellations. Because the constellations look the way they do because we're viewing them from our perspective on Earth. If we were across the galaxy, they would look very different. Also, in thousands and thousands of years, even if we just stay on Earth, the constellations will start to look a bit different because the stars, although they appear stationary from our vantage point on Earth, they are actually moving incredibly quickly throughout the universe, right? Constellations change in other ways too. I mean, stars die. Stars don't last forever. They don't burn forever. They will eventually either go out or explode, right? So that's another reason why constellations change. So constellations aren't these unchanging fixtures in the night sky. How on earth could any of this affect us after all? It seems to me that what astrologers have is a whole lot of correlation. Perhaps they, let's just say for argument's sake that being a Virgo was correlated with some particular character traits. Well, okay, you have a correlation, but what's the cause of that correlation? Astrologers don't really have a cause. If they have anything, it's just correlation. And I don't even think they have correlation for reasons we'll get to in a moment. But it has to do with something called the Barnum effect. So how could it possibly work, Sagan says in the documentary? How could it work? How on earth could it work? One of the points he makes is that light from the planets is very faint when it gets here. And the only physical force that we know of that can affect the only physical force from the sun and the other planets that can affect anything on Earth is gravity. But here's the thing. The planets are really, really far away. The influence of the guy delivering the baby, the obstetrician, he says, his gravitational pull is stronger than the planets. Because even though the planets are way more massive, the doctor delivering the baby is a lot closer. So how on earth is it supposed to work? Maybe it's got to do with some confirmation bias, right? We remember information that supports our worldview more easily. So say we remember, some particular horoscope that seemed to accurately describe an element of our character. We remember that. We don't remember when we encounter a horoscope that doesn't describe us as accurately. We remember the hits and forget the misses. Or it could be the Barnum effect, which I mentioned a moment ago. This is named after Phineas Taylor Barnum, the fellow who said that there is a sucker born every minute. Barnum, you guys, the circus, Barnum and Bailey? That was P.T. Barnum, one half of the Barnum and Bailey circus. And Barnum famously would say, that at one of his circuses or his displays, that there was something for everyone. Something for everyone. And that's what Barnum's statements are like. They are vague statements that can apply to anyone, but which seem oddly specific to you. You know, you can imagine Barnum in his circus, like trying to get someone to come in and take a look at an exhibition, like, "You there, sir, you look like a smart young gentleman." If you hear that, you're going to be like, "Oh, yes, well, thank you, I am." That's like a Barnum statement. That could apply to anyone. You know, that could apply to so many people. But you think it's oddly specific to you. Um, that's what's going on, arguably, with these with horoscopes. They are Barnum statements. And this, I think, is evidenced really nicely by James Randi's little experiment in the film we watched, Secrets of the Psychics, where Randy has everybody fill out a card with personal information so that he can make horoscopes for them. And then he gets everybody a horoscope, and everybody's reading it, and they think, "Oh, this is describing me pretty accurately." And then it's revealed that everyone got the same horoscope. That's the Barnum effect right there. Izzy says, unfortunately, while I don't do horoscope, I do enjoy, the Myers-Briggs type inventory, cognitive functions, and your cog sci major. Isn't that some embarrassing cognitive dissonance? Yeah. Yeah, the Myers-Briggs also suffers from this. Um, a lot of personality questionnaires suffer from this because you read a statement like, like something like, "I am a calm, collected individual. Rate your level of agreement from 1 to 5," right? The worry there is that there's a Barnum effect. So yeah. Um, should we maybe take a break? And then we'll come back and we'll discuss the learning materials. How does that sound? Yeah, a lot of people like the Myers-Briggs. I mean, I remember when I was in college and they had us do it. Um, and then I went to university and learned that it was probably nonsense, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, why does everybody do it?" People in HR, like companies still use this, like to organize teams and departments and to decide who should work with who. They use the Myers-Briggs. They still do this. If anyone ever does it to me, I'm going to be like, "No, just just read my horoscope. Why don't you use my horoscope? Because it's the same thing, you know. Might as well put on some kind of Hogwarts sorting hat, frankly. Um, because the Myers-Briggs is very unreliable because of the Barnum effect. But let's take a break. Let's come back at about let's say 3:50, 3:50. I have, what time is it? I have 3:41 on my phone. So let's come back at 3:56. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I forget what I am. I think I'm an INTJ, which I don't know. Introspective, sure, who isn't? Um, I forget what N stands for. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, neurotic. Guess I could be a little neurotic sometimes. But yeah, let's come back at about 3:56, and we'll talk about the documentary and we'll talk about the readings. Okay, I'll see you in about 15 minutes, everyone. Ooh, okie dokie. How about we get back to it? So, yeah, the next bit of the lecture is really going to be kind of like what we would do in a seminar, kind of discussion based. Oh, I guess I should share my screen, shouldn't I? Doop-a-doop-doo. Okay, share the screen, get back to the slides. So, so that's a bit of a background on where astrology where it comes from, what it's about, what the difference between astronomy and astrology is, etc. So with that, I wonder how you appreciate, if you appreciate, Sagan's treatment of astrology in the episode of Cosmos that I asked you to watch. So he does a few things here, right? He recounts the history of astrology, discusses a lot of the things that we've touched on today, not everything, but a lot of it. You know, as far as ancient peoples relying on the stars and the planets for survival. And then he does my favorite thing ever, which is recount the life of Johannes Kepler. Johannes Kepler discovered the laws of planetary motion, actual laws of nature, which govern the motions of the planets. If it weren't for, Kepler, along with Tycho Brahe, who provided him with a lot of the data that he would use to do this, along with figures like the earlier Copernicus, um, who advocated for the heliocentric model of the solar system as opposed to the Ptolemaic model, and Galileo, we would not have had Isaac Newton and his theory of gravitation. When Isaac Newton said, if I see far, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants, this is who he was talking about. He was talking about Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, Brahe, all of those people. So, what did you think? Well, won't go to the next slide yet, but yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are. Or not just on the documentary, but on astrology in general. Did you know that it was once the same discipline as astronomy? Did you know that it was a form of divination? Yeah, what do we think? I'll get the chat going here so that you can use the chat. You can also, of course, raise a hand. I do get a little distracted when the chat starts blowing up, so I am appreciative when students raise their hand and interact that way. Maybe nobody has any thoughts. That's not good. Eh. Ah, okay. Thomas didn't get a chance to see it. Well, I'm asking what you thought about if you watched the episode of Cosmos, what you thought, or what you think about astrology as a whole. Mac has never given much credibility to astrology. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. When I was young, as I've said before, I was a really big astronomy nerd. So I was into astronomy. Sometimes my mom would read me bedtime stories, but more often than not, she was reading astronomy books to me. Um, so one time for, I think it was a birthday from some relative I didn't see too much, I got a book on astrology, and I was kind of like, well, what is this? This is not what I wanted for my birthday, but yeah, so that was kind of my first introduction to it, and I've never really put a whole lot of stock into it. Jill says, I found it interesting that the stars, such as the Big Dipper, were interpreted differently in different cultures. Yeah, I like that part, and Sagan does such a good job with this. I mean, Sagan was such a good science communicator, when he's talking about all the different ways this has been seen, from the casserole to Charles's wain to that Egyptian one with the guy and the hippopotamus and the crocodile, like, or the bear, the great bear. It's in Latin, it's Ursa Major. And of course, the Greeks saw it as a bear, and the indigenous peoples of the Americas saw it as a bear as well. They saw the Big and Little Dipper as part of two larger constellations that were the Great Bear and the Little Bear. So very cool. Mac's a fan of Carl Sagan. I love that. Is he yeah, no worries. But do make sure you see it. If you haven't seen it, do watch it. It is definitely worth watching. Savina likes reading about astrology, but not really doesn't think of it as a credible way of describing someone. Yeah, that's fair. Aaron, go ahead.
I thought it was really interesting looking at like the origins of Kepler and how like he had this perfect view of the universe, but like how he was really the start of like the scientific idea of like even though he had this cherished belief, he actually rejected it and took the other side, even though it wasn't his own opinion. Like he accepted it, and he went on to use that. And that I know Carl Sagan pointed out that is the essence of science, and I thought that was
Yeah,
really
exactly. And I think that's, it's true. Like if you're going to get into the sciences, which I guess some of you are, I mean, not all of you are philosophy majors, although I think the same thing applies in philosophy as well, is that, um, if you think the world is a certain way, and that does not accord with the picture that the evidence paints, I mean, you've got to change your mind. If you are interested in the truth, like if you are actually interested in knowing what is true, you have to be able to change your mind. Um, and I think that's something that's not really um, emphasized as much as it could be in certain classes. Although I was lucky enough to have a political science professor when I was an undergraduate who would often remark, like, what a privilege it is to be able to change your mind. You can change your mind. It's okay. You don't have to pick something and believe it and stick with it. You can change your mind if you want. It's amazing, right? And Kepler is somebody who's coming out of that sort of that tradition where the Ptolemaic model still has a lot of influence. And for those who haven't seen the documentary, this was about explaining the retrograde motion of the planets. Ptolemy had this intricate model with crystal spheres and all kinds of weird things. Basically, it was a very unparsimonious explanation. It violated Occam's razor. Copernicus comes along and says, why don't we just say the Earth is not the center, the sun is? And Copernicus's model explained things just as well as Ptolemy's did. It was only when Kepler came along and worked out that the planets orbited the sun in ellipses, not perfect circles, that the Ptolemaic model finally went the way of the dinosaur. It was once Kepler worked out that planets move in ellipses and not circles that we were better able to explain retrograde motion, better than the Ptolemaic model, I mean. Although Copernicus's model was simpler. So, Masumi says, I liked how he spoke about constants of nature and how they combine together for creating the cosmos, henceforth showcasing why the episode was called The Harmony of the Worlds. Yeah, big fan of astronomy as compared to astrology, and I like the connections between science and the world. Yeah. I mean, and this idea goes all the way back to Pythagoras. What, since this is a philosophy class, might as well tell you about Pythagoras, right? Pythagoras was a pre-Socratic philosopher who thought that he could explain the cosmos, which means the ordered whole of existence, in terms of number and harmony or harmonia. And cosmos, by the way, yeah, it's the ordered whole of existence. So you could see how this would have been very attractive to Pythagoras, using mathematics to explain, the motions of the planets and so forth. The Pythagorean tradition was a big influence on Plato, which is why Plato saw an education in geometry as an important stepping stone to an education in philosophy, by the way. And we still learn the Pythagorean theorem in elementary school, right? So Pythagoras was right about some stuff. Um, but the Pythagoreans were also kind of cult-like, right? Like when mathematicians discover something new, they share it, they publish it nowadays, right? But Pythagoras, they kept it a secret, right? The Pythagoreans kept it a secret because they believed there was power in knowing these things, right? So it was kind of cult-like. Um, but yeah, that's where the whole harmony thing comes from. It comes down through Pythagoras to Plato, eventually to Ptolemy, and survived all the way up until the scientific revolution. So yeah, if you haven't seen this, do watch it. I think you should watch the entire series. Because yeah, like I said a minute ago, Sagan was the best science communicator I think the world has ever seen. He was also the astronomy professor of Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye. So when they both went to Cornell and Sagan was their astronomy professor. So how cool is that? Fallon says astrology is interesting, but I agree with what others are saying. It's not credible. As fun as it is to put people in neatly defined boxes, there's no way to do that in a way that actually works. Humans are far too complex and unpredictable. Yeah, I think so too. Um, One of the things that I like, oh, harmony and the birth of science. The fusion of observation and hypothesis. Yeah, that's right. Because Kepler and Brahe had to keep observing more and revising their theories. And of course, you know that these two kind of had a kind of an antagonistic relationship toward one another, right? Um, so what I like about what Sagan does is he does not um, he tells the whole story of Kepler and going from the Pythagorean sort of geometrical understanding of the solar system and the Ptolemaic model, um, and abandoning all of that, and how together with Tycho Brahe, he worked it all out and so kind of set the stage for Galileo and Newton. Sagan does not just debunk, right? Sagan does not just say astrology's dumb, don't believe in it. He shows you why astronomy is better, right? He shows you the wonders that astronomy can reveal. He doesn't just say, stuff like, well, astrology's wrong. You're silly if you believe in it. No. He's like, here's all the awesome reasons why you should be into astronomy, right? And that's what he spends the most time on. And that we need more of that, you know, in all of this. So that's my favorite part. Um, I think we're about to, yeah, we're nearly done the slides. This is a bit of a shorter lecture, but I don't know. Think about these things. If you've watched it or when you do get a chance to watch it, think about these things. If you believe in astrology, do you feel like you've learned something more about astrology after this lecture or watching the episode of Cosmos? If your level of knowledge has changed, do you feel like your level of belief has changed if you believed in astrology? Of course, skeptics might have been thinking that, oh, astrology is bunk, it's silly, why believe in it the whole time, right? But even if you were a skeptic, did you know that this is how astrology was supposed to work? And do you notice some connections with how what we discussed, in terms of the animistic view of the world? I do. I mean, the way Freud puts it, the kind of unbounded narcissism of that time. We're important. We're the center of the universe. But the universe and the things in it are alive in the same way that we are. Yench also says this. I mean, that's definitely there in astrology because the planets, before we knew that they were celestial bodies, were believed to be gods, right? Monica, I doesn't believe in astrology, but likes learning its history. Yeah, that's great. No idea about the history behind the days of the week or how the stars and Earth move. Yeah, this is good stuff to know. Because you're like, yeah, why do we have Sunday and Monday and Saturday, but then we have Thursday? What's with that? Well, this is why. It's because the days of the week are associated with the planets that we could see with the naked eye. It I mean, we didn't know about Uranus and Neptune until the invention of the telescope. Um, because these planets, although they're quite large, they're so far away that we just can't see them with the naked eye. Did you guys know that you're the guy who discovered Uranus? Oh, sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry.
No
It's
worries.
kind of random. I'll keep it quick. But like, I was looking up today on my app thing. Um, they just they just like they were talking about big holes, black supermassive black holes at the center of like galaxies and stuff, and how they're actually trying to have people treat it more like it's the heart and lungs of the galaxy rather than just it's at the center of the galaxy. Because I mean, for various things, it's keeping the stars alive, regenerating them, and also throwing out the gas at the end. So it was really interesting how they're still like putting that animistic view of astrology. Even today, they're trying to bring it back. So or use it. So
Yeah. It's there all over the place. I mean, one philosopher who I think gives a really nice account of this tendency is Daniel Dennett. So if you've read any Dennett, you might have heard of his idea about the intentional stance, and that's where we adopt a stance where we treat a system as intentional. That is a term that means it has mental states that have content. So we treat things as if they have beliefs and desires. So when we anthropomorphize physical systems, for example, we might be applying what Daniel Dennett calls the intentional stance. So when I'm saying like, oh, the Earth wants to stay in orbit around the sun. Well, the Earth doesn't want anything, but I can talk about it like that as an intentional system, right? And it's true, yeah, like black holes are uh black holes and stars aren't just fixtures in the sky. They are life and death itself. Like it's crazy. Like all of the stuff that our bodies are made of was generated in the cores of stars, right? Anything heavier than most of the matter in the universe is hydrogen and helium, but the heavier elements, all the way up to gold, are generated in the cores of stars. And everything heavier than that is created in the supernova explosions. So that's why, he doesn't say it in this episode, but in the very first episode of this series, and this is why I have people watch this. This is from 1980. This is older than I am, and maybe sometimes students wonder why are we watching this old timey documentary. It's because Sagan is that good at communicating this stuff, right? And one of the things he says in the opening episode is that we are star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself, and that is just like, oh wow, like ooh, still gives me goosebumps every time I think about it. Well, Amir, probably nothing is created in black holes, at least as far as we know. But there is a theory by a physicist named Lee Smolin, the theory of fecund universes. I'll put this in the chat. Lee Smolin, uh, fecund universe, and his idea is that black holes within a black hole on the other side of that event horizon, what you've actually got is a new universe. So maybe black holes are a source of destruction in this universe, but maybe in the black hole, maybe it's a different universe, right? So if you're interested in that, check that out. Check out Lee Smolin's ideas on black holes and other universes. It's fascinating. So yeah, great question. Monica had also said, I'm a huge North mythology fan, Norse mythology fan, buff rather, and any mythology, and still didn't know about the days of the week. Yeah, yeah, it's very cool. So if you like mythology, Well, all mythology is awesome, but yeah, my favorite mythology, it's a tie between the Greeks and the Norse. Because Greek mythology is like really metal. Like it's insane. It's like so it's really metal. And Norse mythology has got all this weird stuff in it that's really cool. Um so they're both fun. Um and yeah, the days of the week. Yeah, the days of the week in English, because English is a Germanic language. It means it's like a distant cousin of so like old English and Old Norse were like distant cousins. There's one or Old Norse scholar that I follow, who does a lot of public education stuff on YouTube. I'll type his name into the chat. Just kind of used to teach at a university, and now he does it all with Patreon and stuff. But I follow his stuff. Jackson Crawford's his name. And he'll just, do a video where he tells you about Norse mythology and goes into the language and stuff. And there's none of that, none of the romanticization. It's very serious scholarship. But I'd encourage everyone to check that out, because you know, it's really interesting stuff if you like that. Yeah, the God of War games has a lot of lore. Um, I've only played, which one is it? The Not the newest one, but the other one, when Kratos is old and he has his son with him. And I still have to play the other one, where he fights Thor and everybody. But so yeah, I can't remember what my point was. But yeah, the days of the week. Oh, right, right. That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, Old English, like Saxon, like Old English, and Old Norse, were like Spanish and Italian, according to this scholar. And I know I say don't cite YouTube channels, but this is a guy with a PhD who's published papers and done translations on, of the old text. So he's a reputable source. And um, yeah, God of War Ragnarok. That's the one I've got to play. But I'm too busy. I'm gonna do it later. Uh, but yeah. So when those Vikings were going around, raiding the British Isles, they would have been able to somewhat communicate their intentions. They wouldn't have understood each other perfectly, but it would have been like an Italian speaker and a Spanish speaker that you'd understand some of it. And indeed, those languages all come from Proto-Indo-European, as do the Romance languages. So everything from French to English to German to Norwegian to, Farsi to Hindi are all on the same family tree, um, which is really cool. Okay, so yeah, any other thoughts about Sagan before we wrap up on the last slide? There, I do have some discussion. I'm hoping that you guys got to read those readings, if we can discuss those. But was there anything else about, this episode of Cosmos, or about astrology in particular? Doesn't seem so. So who had a chance to look at those readings? They're very short, especially Day's paper. Well, it's not even a paper, it's just like some commentary in a physics magazine. Aaron's given me the thumbs up. Who else? So Day is kind of an example of what I think one ought not to do. If Sagan is an example of what you should do, when it comes to talking about pseudoscience, and we're all guilty of this. Like, we can all be snarky on the internet or to our weird friends or relatives about things they believe that we think are false, right? We can all do that. It's a human tendency. But in Day's brief piece, he doesn't extol the wonders of astronomy at all. He just kind of uh hand waves and dismisses astrology. And he kind of unfairly, I think, goes after women's magazines. Yeah, Izzy. Yeah, like you said in the chat, like he randomly taught, like, these women with their astrology, and it's like, hang on. These magazines create and cultivate this audience. If this is almost like a systemic issue, right? If we want to talk about feminism and systemic problems, it's not the women that believe in astrology. It's the publishers that have gotten them interested in this and keep selling it to them, right? So that's two things that I think that Day does absolutely terribly in that short piece. He does not do what Sagan does. He doesn't instill that sense of wonder about astrology. He just says, well, astrology is absurd and people who believe in it are wrong. And also these ladies with their astrology magazines, ooh, and I'm just like, okay, what about, I mean, they're totally like, okay, let's talk about gender. How much pseudoscience is out there that men predominantly believe in? I mean, have you seen the fitness influencer industry lately? There is so much nonsense there. A lot of guys listening to Joe Rogan, taking their alpha brain and eating liver raw out of the animal they've just killed as if that's going to make them big and strong and tough. I'm like, no, it's all pseudoscience. Yeah, exactly. Izzy, like those guys that are like, I'm such an alpha or whatever, like I'm a sigma, or it's like, okay, so I'm that's the equivalent of I'm a Dor Delano and I'm a fucking Libra. Like, I'm not picking on Adore Delano, by the way, right? Like, yeah, Nolan, the Liver King, is a great example. Like, this is a guy who's way more jacked than he has any business being, and he says it's all because he just eats organ meats and stuff. um yeah, like, what if he gets a tapeworm? Yeah, Andrew Huberman is another one, sleeping on plywood. And of course it was all a lie. The dude was juiced to the gills with steroids. It wasn't eating raw meat, it was all the steroids he was taking, right? Like, yeah, yeah, it's yeah, it was scientific, but it was steroids. And he was lying to his audience about that. So, if we want to talk gender, like, it's like, okay, sure, maybe maybe women tend to be greater consumers of astrological media. Men are consumers of a lot of other bunk as well, right? Yeah, Andrew Huberman, I'm quite he's kind of almost got like a cult like following, which is weird to me. Yeah, American Psycho, I still haven't seen that, but and I'm not picking on the Liver King or Joe Rogan. There's a lot, I like to watch those feats of strength, right? I like to watch Giants Live, World's Strongest Man, the Arnold Classic. I like watching these gigantic men and women picking up heavy stuff and moving it around. I think it's cool. Like, but a lot of those guys make a lot of that money that they make by promoting supplements and different health interventions that do nothing. Like, I'm watching Eddie Hall on YouTube, and he's talking about his Kangen water filter and how it does all this magical stuff. And it's like, no, it doesn't. It does not do that. This Kangen water, claims about this water filtration system are so ridiculous that some even claim it cures cancer. Like, it's just water, right? And it's based on the pseudoscientific principle that water has a memory, right? So this is not just women. Like, this plays into the whole men are rational and women are irrational stereotype. And that is just not true. Men and women can be rational or irrational. Does not matter. Your gender does not determine how rational you can be, right? What determines it is your education, your exposure to different ideas, and perhaps different personality traits and intelligence levels. But it's not your gender. Yeah, and like Jill says, there is increased belief in astrology these days, and that's mentioned by Anderson et al. Et al. And I think they're right. They're right to point out that people tend to go towards not just astrology, but people tend to gravitate more toward religion, toward gurus like Huberman. I would call him a sort of guru um, in times of crisis, and we're in a time of crisis. We've been in a time of crisis for a while. We've got climate crisis, we've got the war in Ukraine, we've got the situation in Gaza, we've got civil wars elsewhere in the world. There was the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Time of crisis. When is it not a time of crisis, right? And so people will gravitate toward these gurus or to religions or to traveling salesmen. And astrology is one of the things that people gravitate towards. And at least Anderson and colleagues think that maybe this is the reason, because we're in a sort of time of crisis and we want some certainty. It's like Jensch said, like we erected these bastions of science against the uncertainty of the world. Well, there's another way not to be uncertain about things, and that is to believe in astrology or to subscribe to a religion or conspiracy theories, too. Same thing. Yeah, fake colorblind glasses. What's the dealio with those? Like, is that glasses where it purports to make people who are colorblind see color? Like, how would that even work? If you're colorblind, it's because you're missing certain cones. Like, so yeah. Okay, so they don't work. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, they just alter the contrast. Okay. Another one is the that I remember. I see. Yeah, they alter the contrast. Yeah. Another one I remember, I still see these from time to time in drugstores and pharmacies, but the Q-ray bracelet, it's just a piece of metal that you put on your wrist, but all kinds of crazy claims were made about this, and these are being marketed towards people with chronic pain, and it's just the placebo effect. The bracelet doesn't do anything, but people in chronic pain are given their money to some company that's selling you something that doesn't work, right? um it's sad, and that's why I do this. I'm not out here to just debunk and belittle. Like, there are people out there who are going to try and take advantage of you. There are people that will take your money, that will take advantage of your money or your time. um you have to have a critical outlook. You have to have a good head on your shoulders. um so astrology might be fun. It's like looking for UFOs or Bigfoot or doing a Ouija board session. It might be a little fun if you're only doing it for fun, but don't be taken in by a con artist, right? But here's an interesting thing. Anderson's study looked at the big five personality traits. So that's like conscientiousness, openness to new experience, introversion, neuroticism, and something else. Yeah, ocean. I forget all of them. Although I've taken the test. I have actually taken the test. Agreeableness, that's the one. Yeah. So the big five. Then they looked at narcissism. They looked at intelligence. And they found, doing their multiple linear regression, don't worry about any of the statistics in that paper. This is not a statistics class, but they did a linear regression, which, in a nutshell, is a statistical technique that you can use to take a bunch of different variables and see how they predict the variable that you're interested in. So in this case, belief in astrology is the variable we're interested in. So they took all these other variables, which people did, by filling out questionnaires with statements like, I am very agreeable. How much do you agree? One for don't agree at all, and five for strongly agree, right? Like, am I very agreeable? I don't agree to that at all. I'm giving a one, right? It's Likert scales. And they take all of this data on all of these different personality traits and see which one is the best predictor of belief in astrology. And it turns out narcissism was the one that was the best predictor of belief in astrology. Yeah, it's part of the dark triad, like Savina says, along with psychopathy and Machiavellianism. Um, Again, what do we think? You have to be careful the way, like, when you're doing this research, you have to be careful with the way that you write it up. And I think the authors did a good job, but this could be taken this could be taken the wrong way, right? Like, oh, if you believe in astrology, you're a narcissist. Well, no, that's not what it means. It means that if you have higher levels of this personality trait, you're more likely to believe in astrology. Why? Because astrology, your horoscopes, it's all about you. I'm this kind of person, and I need to watch out for when Mercury's in retrograde or something. And if I do these things according to where the stars and planets are, I'll be prosperous and happy and have a good life. And it's me, me, me. It's about me, right? Um, So it's not to say that you're a narcissist. It's just that those who are, I guess, more interested in themselves tend to be more prone to believe in astrology, right? Yeah, and that's another interesting finding, Jill. Intelligence was uh, associated less with belief than expected. Although higher intelligence is correlated with a lower propensity to experience apophenia and lower likelihood of belief in conspiracy theories. Although there are some smart people that have fallen for conspiracy theories, right? It happens. Um, yeah, that's right, Izzy. They used a mental rotation task, which yeah, visual spatial, which is really one half. Like, if you go and take an IQ test like the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, visual spatial reasoning is one half. Verbal reasoning is the other. Yeah, I agree, Izzy. I'm not super terrible at the visual spatial stuff, but yeah, my verbal reasoning is like ridiculously high. I'm not trying to brag, but it's like it has no business being, even though I'm like talking all over the place and I don't seem coherent all the time. I have been tested and my verbal IQ is like way higher than it has any business being, but my visual spatial is just above average. It's not super high, right? Um so they're doing like mental rotation stuff, which, that's part of intelligence, but it's not verbal intelligence. And there's many forms of intelligence besides just these two, right? Like, um that's another thing I see a lot of on the another thing that's, excuse my language, another area that does have quite a lot of bullshit to contend with is IQ, you know. Um Yeah, yeah, and that's weird. And that's why when you get results, they break it down, right? Like your verbal score and your visual spatial score. I don't think IQ tests are actually very good measures of intelligence. Um, and I see the way a lot of people fixate on IQ. Um, I see a lot of discussion online in different online spaces, Twitter, Quora, where for some reason people are just really obsessed with IQ. And it's like, you know what? It can tell you how bad you are at verbal reasoning or visual spatial reasoning, but I actually don't think it's that good for intelligence overall. Monica says um, she knows somebody high on the narcissist scale, and they are so deeply into astrology that they consult with their psychic medium before. Yeah, okay, so that's interesting. Yeah. Makes me think of I am Shinrikyo Kuyo. Yes, yes, the sarin gas attack, right. The perpetrators were doctors, physicists, etc., very intelligent people, but they got grabbed by a doomsday cult. Scientology too. Yeah, that's right. A belief in crazy things is yeah, you're right, Thomas. Smart people get taken in all the time by nonsense. Yeah. Yeah, Izzy, good point. Like if I go and take an IQ test, I'm probably gonna practice. You know what I mean? I'm gonna do some visual spatial stuff, right? Like I'm gonna play with my cube here or something, right? Or I'm gonna play some chess, or I'm gonna do some puzzles, right? I'm gonna prepare for it. I'm not just gonna go in blind, right? Um, but that said, it's not a complete measure of intelligence at all, and it changes. It changes over the course of your life. It changes from year to year. I mean, on average, the human population is smarter now than they were a century ago. All of us, just on average, we're smarter because we have better diet, better medicine, and everything. And that's why IQ is normalized at 100. Yeah, emotional intelligence. Yeah, because think about it. There are brilliant scientists who don't understand maybe why they have offended somebody with something they've said, right? They make a remark and don't understand why somebody takes offense, right? So I don't know. Um, but yeah, that's an interesting study I found just because it was quite recent, and because it looked at narcissism as a personality trait, not like they weren't looking at diagnosed narcissists. They were just looking at regular people. And they do acknowledge there were limitations to this study because it relies on self reporting. So there's a worry of the Barnum effect. Um, it was done by word of mouth, and there could be a sample bias, kind of a self selection bias. Yeah, like Jill says, it looked at self-identifying personality traits, and also, um, it was just put out there by word of mouth on the internet, and uh, you know, a lot of people who believed in astrology might have been like, "Oh yeah, that sounds fun," whereas somebody like me who doubts astrology might be like, "I'm not going to bother with that survey. I just won't do it." Right? So there are limitations, but there is something, wouldn't you say there is something intuitively plausible about the idea of those who are more self-interested? Um, yeah, yeah, maybe narcissists. Yeah, like Izzy says, there's a worry right there. Like, oh, I'm so important. I better do this survey and contribute to scientific understanding, right, of humanity. Um, whereas somebody who doesn't care isn't going to do that. I don't know, but isn't there something intuitively striking, that it's something plausible about the idea that people who believe in astrology might have more narcissistic tendencies? To me, it's not uh, it's not far fetched. It's not that far fetched of an idea, but as we've learned over the past few weeks, what you really need to do in science is to replicate. So, will this survey's results be replicated? We'll see. I mean, this paper is only 2 years old. We may see papers that try in the near future that try and replicate this. Hey, maybe I should do that. That would be fun, actually, to do a little survey and do a write up and some data analysis. It's been a while since I've done that. But regardless of whether I do so or whether someone else does it, somebody ought to do it. See if we can replicate their findings, right? Jill says self-interested personalities predominantly wouldn't identify themselves as a. Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point. In fact, I think the people who would be most, should we say, offended by the core claim of this paper would be those people who took the survey. Okay, Izzy disagrees. Okay, Izzy, it's not an intuitive thought to me because personally, when I find out people are interested in astrology, usually their first order of business is asking a lot of questions about you rather than talking about themselves. Astrology girlies love helping you make your star chart. Okay, good point. Maybe that's something that the authors might have considered or that any future studies should consider. So yeah, that's a good point. Um, but maybe it's the belief and not the practice. Maybe that's how the authors would respond to that counter argument. Like, oh, sure, when it comes to actually doing it, yeah, there's a communal sort of element to it. But when it comes to the belief, that's where the narcissism factors in. Who knows? Either way, I think more work is needed on this. Yeah, Savina agrees. Read an article where it was mentioned most people that are into these fields have deeply rooted trauma of not being heard as children. Yeah, yeah, good point. Yeah. And that's kind of like the way our discussion went the other week. There are like little paranormal communities, right? There are people that get together and go looking for Bigfoot or UFO hunting, and they like that community. The queer community is, I think, interest in the paranormal is high in the queer community, because it's one of those ways that you kind of bond with your community and with your chosen family and everything, right? Um, and there may be higher instances of trauma in certain of those communities, right? So yeah, I think definitely more research can be done. And this is the sort of thing that I think anomalistic psychologists really ought to be doing. I'm very disappointed that anomalistic psychology is not bigger than it is, given, as we've seen, the renewed interest in astrology and other paranormal phenomena. Um, So, yeah. Any other thoughts before we wrap up? I really don't have too much else to say other than, here at the bottom, in addition to what you all have raised in the chat, you know, oh, hopefully am I clear now? Well, hopefully I'm not cutting out right now. Yes, I am, or no, yes, I'm not. Okay, good. I'll try not to move as much. Um, yeah, there's other factors beyond narcissism, like levels of education or intelligence, and we know that these lower the likelihood that you'll subscribe to um, belief in the paranormal or conspiracy theories, etc. And as we've seen, there's also confirmation bias in the Barnum effect, which everyone is susceptible to, regardless of your level of education, your intelligence, um, your personality traits. All of us are subject to cognitive biases like these. Um, so if you start thinking that there's no way you can ever be fooled, well, you've made yourself a mark for being fooled, haven't you? And this is why science is collaborative, why we use the scientific method, why we rely on peer review and replication, because even scientists, as you've mentioned in the chat, can be wrong and can be taken in by nonsense. I mean, hell, that's basically what psychical research was, right? So that is all I have for today. Anything anyone else would like to share? Guess I can stop sharing my screen now. So what do we think of astrology? It seems like most of us are skeptical, but maybe like to have a little fun with it. Um, I hope you enjoyed learning about how astrology is believed to work by its practitioners. And yeah, Monica's, yeah, I love the idea, but don't believe in it. Yeah. Yeah, I like astronomy. I mean, my perspective on this is that you should just learn about astronomy. Yeah, maybe it works in fiction, like Thomas says. Keep it as a plot device, kind of like magic, in fantasy fiction, right? And Nolan says skeptical, but good to know more. Yeah, fun way to make people think you know everything about them. Yeah. Yes, Olivia, I did. That's where I went. My partner and I went there Saturday night. Was that where you were? Did you see me at the theater? Yeah, okay, makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, that's where I was. So it wouldn't have been a doppelganger. Oh, really? Yeah, well, we were sitting in the very back corner. So there was no one behind us. Oh, maybe I did have a doppelganger. But maybe you saw me around the theater or somewhere else in there. Yeah. But yeah, we were in the back corner. It's actually a nice, comfy spot. Feels really cozy and safe when you're in the corner, and you're just kind of like you're at home in the living room almost. So I like it. Um, but yeah, okay. Well, I don't have anything else. If you haven't seen the episode of Cosmos that I posted, do watch it. And the readings that I posted, those are the kind of sources that you're probably going to want to go for um, on your paper proposal and for your final essay. So, um, oh yeah, yeah. Well, I that's just too much. Izzy, it's a good point. Yeah, but I kind of wanted to stick to fundamental principles because yeah, it's kind of like learning how horoscopes are structured is interesting, but to me it reminds me of those people that study non-existent things like um I had a coworker when I was an undergrad who was really interested in dragonology, and I asked them what is that, and they said, "Oh, it's all about dragons and all the different kinds of dragons." And I was like, "That's cool, but but they don't exist though." So like, it's interesting, but I'm not going to systematically study that, I guess is what I what I was thinking. But yeah, I mean, you can certainly learn about that on your own if you desire. Um, Savina says, for our topics, I'm a little confused. Do they need to be within a specific criteria, uh, or can they be almost anything we are interested in writing about? Yeah, the second thing. It can be anything related to the paranormal, the supernatural, unsolved mysteries. It could be it could be a purported paranormal or supernatural phenomenon or place. It could be, you know, fictional, though. You can talk about, vampires in literature, for example. Any kind of like weird paranormal, unsolved mystery kind of thing is fair game. All right. Any other questions before we wrap up? All right. Well, we'll stop for today. Again, if you haven't watched this, do watch it. Watch the Carl Sagan thing. There's another one for next time. And thanks again to Jill for helping me find those links because my uploads weren't working. So next time, there's not a lot of reading, but I've got another episode of Cosmos. I've got the UAP report. And I've also found a link for the NASA public meeting on UAPs, which is long, but I would encourage you to watch it. It's quite interesting. And I'll post some other short videos to watch as well. So next time we'll talk about aliens and UFOs. Do read through those papers, especially Anderson et al., if you're interested in writing on astrology. And keep an eye out for that kind of source material for your proposal and your final paper. Those are the kind of scholarly sources that I'd like to see, in addition to our other readings that we've read for our class. So thanks everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your Monday. And remember, Tuesday, look up. You may see, there's no guarantees, but you may see the Northern Lights. You never know. So definitely look up, check the KP index, uh, see what happens. Maybe you'll see something cool. All right. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you all next time.